right, so thank you so much for staying with us here on the AM show. We're still talking about peace. We're still talking the aftermath of the declaration of the 2020 presidential results. We're still talking about the position of the NDC not to accept the results. Let's speak to the executive director of IDEC, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, whose outfit was very instrumental in this peace pact that was signed on the 4th of December before the December 7 polls. He's joined us. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Hello, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete. A very good morning to you, if you can hear me.
Thank you. I hear you.
Okay, great. There you are. So just going back to the peace pact that was signed, where the two key leaders of the main political parties pledged to commit themselves to support a peaceful elections in the December 2020 general elections, to undertake to accept the results of the elections, undertake to restrain their supporters from resorting to violence in the aftermath of the elections, and then committed to the judicial resolution of all disputes. So with this in mind, with where we are with the process today, what do you, first of all, what do you make of how things have unfolded?
Thank you. Thank you. I think, Mama, this your question is difficult. I don't understand. Can you break it down, how things have unfolded? You mean my expectations of the outcome of the elections before they took place, or where we are now?
Okay, so let me break it down. Let's even go back to, let's go back to the day of elections and the issues that have come up. And I want to make reference, because we're not saying anything that's not on record. So the election task force, the IGP spoke yesterday, and he did indicate that 5 persons died and 17 persons have been injured all through this process of election 2020. The NDC has decided not to accept the outcome of the election. So what's your views on these developments?
Well, elections outcomes are difficult to determine ab initio. Speculation and some kind of projections will be made, but ultimately the voters speak. And sometimes what their wishes are or what their decisions are only seen after the event. So in the place we are now, I think we've had, this probably is one of the closest elections we've had, if you're looking at the situation in Parliament and the margins for the presidential. And we anticipated this. The essence of the Peace Pact is to remind our leaders that in a democracy, you may not like outcomes, and there will be politics is full of breaking rules and doing things that shouldn't be done. It's not 100% neat and clean and so on. But the way to go is to go to court to resolve those. You might concede to elections not because you feel that, you know, everything was fairly done, but sometimes the calculation is that resorting to violence will be too high a cost and might be destructive, might affect many more people. The leader sometimes puts all other considerations over and above their personal ones, and that's what we've seen of our leaders. So in this situation where the two parties are contesting the results of the presidency and then the parliament, and now we're told that one had 37, that's NPP, NDC 136, and there's one more to be counted or decided. This is the situation we are facing. Those who have grievances, in the case of the NDC, where it feels strongly that something untoward had happened, I think that we've had instances where cases have gone to parliament and they've been resolved, or parliamentary, both for parliament and presidential. In the parliamentary situation, we've seen sometimes results, the elections has to be, you know, there has to be new elections, or those who are legitimate, you know, winners are the ones who are given the seat. So it's not very difficult for the courts to determine parliamentary cases on the face of the facts and the evidence. And that is often done. So if there are contentious issues or they feel, any of the sides feel unfairly treated, I think they should go to court. With the evidence, the court would administer that, the justice that is required.
Great.
With the case of the presidency, it's often difficult. In fact, there aren't many cases where the results declared by the Electoral Commission are reversed by courts. 4 years ago in 2017, Kenya attempted that. And it was such a classic. Everybody thought, look, for the first time, we are seeing a determination to do what is right. And they criticized the electoral process, the counting, the quality of the whole process, and they said, no, this thing has to be rerun. Unfortunately, the directives that the Supreme Court gave were not followed through by the IEBC. That's the name of the Kenyan Electoral Commission, Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And instead of, when they were not doing what was required, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand that when the court gives directives and there are problems with implementation or interpretation, you go back to the court for further directions, maybe further clearer directions. Raila Odinga didn't do that. He rather decided to boycott the whole thing and to call his people on the streets. And so the second vote took place, and then the Supreme Court confirmed the outcome of that vote. That was. Now, so you do have that situation, but by and large, presidential elections once declared are not, rejected by the Supreme Court or overturned. This is because, in most cases, it's not because everything that was done was fair, but we've also found out that, or learned that the Supreme Court takes a whole lot of factors. One is stability, political stability. The Nigerian election last year, 2019, it was challenged in court on the weight of the evidence, but the court still said, well, the results stand. We've seen our case in 2012. They are not the same. The NPP felt very strongly. It had evidence and so on. 9 months, thorough work was done and so on. The Supreme Court came to a conclusion. The party leader decided to say he did not accept the result, but respected it and conceded, and we went for it, although his members were vehemently opposed. We also have an instance where, especially in the second term, when you're trying your second term of office, like in 2004, the NDC found itself in a similar situation where it complained that both for the presidential and the parliamentary, they felt the EC at that time, Dr. Farijan, had not been fair or was, had done a deal or something, treated them unfairly by siding with the NPP in government at the time. So they went to court. I think Rojo, Metronudo and others. But what saved the situation was that the late President Mills did not pursue it. And he was the key person who should have gone into the dock to make his case and answer or challenge what the EC had done. But he decided to move on. And indeed, it became one of the major sources of conflict with the late president, father of their party, and the Fourth Republic. So we have different instances here. What I think we are in here now is a different situation. We've never had it so close, okay, in terms of the closeness of the presidential elections and the parliamentary, where, Parliament could slip into the hands of the opposition if everything is looked at. And there are contentions. I would urge that the party seriously considers going to court on both if they want. But there is also a fourth or a third approach that has emerged. In the case of Kenya, after Raila Odinga clearly lost because the second round he didn't contest it any seriously, he decided to mobilize his troops on the streets. And as it happened in 2007, this time the citizens did not respond. Why? Because they said that Kenya's devolution of resources and administrative power, financial administrative resources to the counties, like their regions, had brought about quite some significant change in the economy, people had jobs, certain services were being provided, and they felt they had to go to work, or they were content with what they were. They were not looking at the bigger picture. So some progress in devolution diffused the enthusiasm his supporters had to step forward. Then Raila decided to wage a certain campaign because he was determined that this time around he was not giving in. With a lot of pressure from the African Union and also amongst Kenyans and other international statesmen, Raila and the current president, Kenyatta, had to talk. And apparently they knew each other very well. They've grown up, it's two families in their political context and so on. But they ended up with a deal. What some said was that to appease Raila or diffuse whatever it was, some costs of campaigns and so on had to be paid. So this is the Kenyan way of resolving presidential election controversy or conflict. They had to settle some of their campaign costs. And then Raila was elevated. There was a program on which they are working together now, which is that they are strengthening national cohesion, rebuilding the Kenyan nation, which was a separate program. And really, that is what Kenyatta and Odinga had focused on in the last 2 years. And I think 2020, 2019, I can't remember. Yeah, 2017, the last 3 years. And it's Kenyatta's last term of office. But this project has even created a split within his party, where his vice president, who wants to succeed him, Ruto, has been sidelined, and there's a lot of fighting and violence and attacks. There's a huge fight going on within Kenyatta's party because of the statesman-like approach he has taken, that the Kenyan nation was too polarized, and he needed to bring it together, and he couldn't do that except with the opposition leader. So there are different ways in which, in democratic practice, some conversation would have to go on.
Okay.
There are losses, huge losses. Of course, when you have power, you pay debt, you have power to make decisions and implement your policies and all that.
Yeah.
And so it's not an easy thing where you feel that you've been unfairly treated. But violence is not an option, seriously, because it doesn't solve the problem.
Dr. Akwete, we'll come to the issue of the violence. Just before my colleague Ben comes in, though, it's good that you brought the African perspective to this conversation. You're a very experienced governance person. You know our system very well. Which one of these would you say would be helpful to our situation right now?
I honestly think NDC must go to court. The precedents are clear. In 2004, they went to court, even if the case didn't go through. But it gave, in fact, their contribution to our fourth Republican democracy is immense. It is out of that court case in 2004 that the Elections Adjudication Manual came up. And that manual, which is revised every election, actually scrutinized the EC in 2012 and brought some administrative and regulatory changes. And the pink sheets over which they are fighting came through that. If they hadn't gone to court and pushed it, probably the pink sheet issue would not have a reason. But the Supreme Court decision, whoever filed the writ and then decided that pink sheets for transparency have to be shared and so on. NDC says they have all the pink sheets to make their case. That sounds like they have the solid basis to go to court for the determination to be made on both. So for me, that is the first principle, but the first part, where the Supreme Court would decide, but it's litigation, and litigation does not always suit, because it's a winner and a loser, and sometimes it can polarize. The Kenyan example that I proved is one that seeks reconciliation, especially when your numbers are not strong. I don't think whoever wins has strong numbers to govern the country and do what they like. It looks like the electorate has spoken. They want some kind of different way of winner takes all, majority overrides minority kind of government, which we've had. The margins are so little in Parliament, frankly, and there are major things that you can't do if you don't have the opposition support. And the president doesn't really have some huge thing, although that is a different matter. Once you win, you have everything. Mm-hmm. So I think that the court process for me is first, or the NDC decides that, look, we would not go to court, but they would engage. The president himself has to engage in a way that resolves, and really justice must be sought. I believe they should go to court, but it should not exclude other ways of also engaging to see what really did the voters say and what changes how would they serve them. Mama V, the last thing I'll say is this. In our history in the Fourth Republic, it looks like the trend is not changing. The voters would always give a party after the first term a second term. So we've not seen one-term presidency. NPP tried to give NDC under the late President Mills and subsequently President Mahama a one-term. They were so determined, but they were not successful. And that is where we are. 2012 is what we are witnessing in 2016. But if you look at it in the context of in the general context, the trend since 1992, it may be the voters changing their mind, but this time, whatever has happened has left us in some dreadlock or deadlock. Do you see? So you could tell that it's probably a repetition of the trend. But the margins are so tiny that probably one-term presidency and party in governance is something nearer. But for this one, there's a controversy. And if the two leaders committed to go to court, if they wouldn't concede, then they should use the judicial process. I believe they have to do that. It's a matter of integrity. And for the investigations to be done thoroughly with their evidence. Who knows what the Supreme Court might decide?
Dr. Akwete, if you can hear me, Benjamin here. Now, I'd like to just find out, speaking about those slim margins, and as one who has vast experience when it comes to governance-related matters, how do you think this is going to impact our democracy, especially considering that in Parliament, we just might have a very slim majority, a majority that could just be one, seat. How is that going to impact the dynamics of our democracy, do you foresee?
Well, democracy is a construction. Okay, it's human beings who shape it and so on. And in crisis, leaders have always found other means, and the lawyers will come and design and craft the law and put up a mechanism and all that. What I see as going is that, well, you might have a split parliament, equal numbers. I hear Senate has not been declared, and there's some controversy. But you could have that, or you could have one leading, or two, or whatever. In that situation, the president would find it difficult to push a whole lot of agenda through. In a parliamentary system, this is when coalitions are formed. You don't have the numbers. So you have to get the other side on board to govern. And what they usually say is that they do not call for new elections, but they tell you that the voters, the electorate has spoken, and they interpret what the electorate says. So I find it significant that this time there's some kind of interpretation of where the heartbeat of the electorate is. And they'll say, okay, so how do we interpret that and how do we work? I think that some co-governance will be required. It's not simply a matter of saying, on everything, NDC supporters. It might, if they are in the minority, it's NDC to decide they want to do that. Otherwise, the way forward in this kind of situation will be that they would agree on a program of work. For example, there are things in NDC manifesto and NPP manifestos that converge. You pull all those things on which there's convergence and say, we agree here. There's consensus, this has to be done. How are we going to do it? So NDC, for instance, just giving an example, or if it's the other way around too, would not necessarily take on ministerial positions. Of course, the president can offer that, and it's up to a party. In fact, the president cannot appoint an NDC person individually to say, because of this, I'm appointing you to be this minister or that. It has to be a negotiation and dialogue with the party for them to agree. So there has to be some agreement on the work program, on how they are going to go forward, and so that Parliament could get things done. But at the same time, NDC would, or the party that is disadvantaged in this case, would also have to make sure that some of these programs and some of its areas, constituencies and so on, also benefit immensely from programs. It's always negotiated, and you can't always predict the outcome, but it's a human thing, and they can find the common ground. The fact is that we need to find a common ground. The violence is not an option. It will only be destructive. Both parties have contributed immensely to building our democracy. And actually, at the moment as I speak, Ghana's democracy is seen as the democracy that is also helping manage democracy in Africa. There are serious setbacks. Did you see the recent Tanzanian election? Have we seen La Côte d'Ivoire? Did we see Guinea, Mali? And so on. And even look at the role Ghana played in getting the Malians to resolve their conflict. The AU, the ECOWAS could not push it so hard. Ghana went in and then, and so on. So there's a lot at stake that cannot be destroyed through violence. I don't think even violence will succeed, but I think that NPP and NDC, they both have a lot to offer if only they will find the basis to engage and decide that given the peculiarity of the situation, we have 4 years ahead, there will be another opportunity. And so let's see how we work. Let's just be guided by the assumed electorate's will or wish and work around it and move the country forward. After all, 2012, we saw what happened. 2016, the electorate decided. Who says the electorate will not make that decision? Because they would reflect on the consequences of what they had decided now. That is, if we get all the facts and it's true, then they would know what to do the next time.
Right. Now, from where you sit, especially as this democracy, all that we're doing now, electing representatives, be it on the presidential level, parliamentary level, feeds into our governance structures. What more do you feel we can do to ensure the credibility of our elections, to ensure that we don't keep coming to this point where electoral results are rejected by political parties? We saw the first one, 2012, and now some 8 years later, we're back at the same point. What more do you feel can be done in our electoral process? Because, look, you're looking at the fact that President Mahama came, he brought in a chairperson. Now this party came, the NPP came, took out that chairperson, brought its own chairperson. Of course, the chair people represent the country, but they also create certain impressions in the minds of people. How do we tackle some of these matters to ensure that when the electoral results are declared, you don't have people questioning them like we're becoming accustomed to now?
Questioning would always happen. It's a competition. Sometimes it's not always fair. People don't always play 100% by the rules. There's cheating, there is buying votes, money. I mean, we've gotten to the point that there is no shame and no consequence for buying votes. The law says it's wrong, and nothing is enforced in our elections. There's a lot of abuse of incumbency by these two parties. Now, these two parties have governed us for the last 28 years. The competitive nature of election outcomes reflects their power. We call them duopolies, two monopolies. There's no regulation of the parties, by the way, in any serious sense. If the regulation that was put there in 1992 was meant to control one party and give an edge to the other, it ceased to be in 2008. After 8 years, it changed. And by 2008, we are seeing equal power. And the brutality of it is that there is no state entity that calls them to order. The EC cannot do all the things that we find disturbing about the parties. It cannot even ensure financial accountability. Dr. Farijan has talked about this and said there's a need for a new framework. And there is the need for a state entity. The state is bigger than these two parties, but they behave as if they are the state. And in the 28 years, every institution of governance, every public service, this commission, that commission, they have not seen to strengthening them. Okay, so there is the need for some reforms. Fortunately, these two parties, for the first time in our history of the Fourth Republic, have put constitutional amendments in their manifestos. And these are constitutional amendments, if you take the MPPs and the NDCs. In fact, what the electorate has decided now, the outcomes we have seen, whatever untoward went on with determining who won, none of them can amend the Constitution without the support of the other. So, and that is the truth. You need either a referendum, which is even more challenging than amend. That is if it's entrenched. Okay, 40% turnout and 75% or so voting yes. How do you get that? And you saw how when the two parties last year disagreed on some of the elements of the process, the referendum couldn't take place. It's even going to be worse now because of the powers in the House. Now, when you go to those elements that can be amended by Parliament, you need 2/3 of majority of the total membership. How do you get that? Now that in 2019, just look at this year, and this NPP had majority, significant. But now, one or what? What are they going to do? So I think the electorate has spoken. There are reforms that are needed. We have to deal with the vigilante threat because the laws are not being enforced. The police is not able to enforce any law when it comes to our politics and political violence or whatever. The president committed himself to eradicate it. It will take constitutional reform and some autonomy from the police, bigger autonomy than they have now. And you have to change the constitution. You know, most of these proposals we're talking about people already under the CRC and the CRIC. They worked on a whole lot of reforms of institutions, but there was disagreement between the two parties and they couldn't move. In the same way you see this NDC, MPP 2431, the election of chief executives, but also the president's ambition to reform the party system and open up local government. He says devolution and parties must get involved and strengthen the multi-party democracy. Again, he couldn't move because NDC. So if you touch any of them, you need the support of the other. And just amending just 55.3 or 243, you're going to go a lot into what CRIC did, their proposals. There were about 97 of them, plus other reforms. Yeah. So we are in a good place, largely, in the tightness of things. The two parties just have to work to bring about the reforms we need to strengthen the democratic system, to deal with the vigilante violence, to strengthen the police, and bring really strong state bureaucracies that can deliver the services we require.
Dr. Akwete,
it's going to take the two of them.
We've got 1 minute with you. The peace pact that was signed, and the basis was eradicating electoral violence in Ghana's democracy. 5 people have died, 17 injured. Have we failed?
We haven't failed at all. You're talking about a 17+ million electorate, registered voters. It's sad, it's unfortunate, but it only reflects the weakness that political leadership. You read the title, but you left the role of political leadership. So the essence was that our political leaders will seize the bull by the horns and move it in the direction that will strengthen our democracy and stop this vigilante violence. Whether it's police, those who committed the offense ought to be arrested, investigated, prosecuted, and punished. The criminal justice system is sort of covered, you know, it's insulated from political violence and political offenses, but all of which are criminal. So unfortunate and sad as these are, will the culprits be brought to book? It will be a failure if the police do not pursue this matter and bring the culprits to book. So it's not the idea. The Peace Pact actually is the instrument that has helped us strengthen the electoral process and cultivate this idea. We know more about the Electoral Commission, its rules and regulations. The Peace Pact gave you pink sheets because people could go to court, cleanse the register before 2016. They gave us the 2016 elections because they complied largely. What they haven't done, but is also in the Peace Pact, is that they would work together to change the conditions or remove the conditions that is leading to this violence, resurgent violence in our democracy. They don't go together. The more democracy you have, one will assume that the stronger the rule of law and the less violence. In our case, it looks like violence is competing with what peace we have. And so the Peace Pact is extremely important. And we should hold on to it, use it to steer our leaders to court. And not any other way.
We thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you for all the analysis, helping us with this big issue of governance, violence, and where we are today. He's the Executive Director of the Institute for Democratic Governance, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, there, helping us with this conversation, and it's been absolutely fruitful. We hope that we are all learning from the processes and the conversations that we're bringing to you, Ben.
And well, what can we say? Our democracy is going through teething stages still, especially 28 years down the line in the Fourth Republic. Others have practiced this for centuries, and even they still grapple with a few things here and there. But in our setting, maybe we may not have the benefit of time, because it said that you don't reinvent the wheel. So some wrong things you learn from the experiences or experiments of other nations for us to build upon. As we leave, my biggest worry is the outbreak of violence in certain areas, or at least people pouring out on the streets and reacting in certain ways that we wouldn't want to see. Let's just stay calm. Let's follow the legal processes, and let's put Mother Ghana first. That's what I would say.
And that's our show for today. Log on to myjoyonline.com. We've got plenty of news to share with you. The next major bulletin will be at 10, Joy News Desk. But for now, we thank you for watching our show. Enjoy the rest of the day and have a good weekend. We'll see you back on Monday, 6 a.m.